So the country of England got started on the process of settling colonies in the New World a little bit later than Spain and Portugal did. But once they got started, they really did take off with a vengeance. In the 16th century, English sailors and explorers had laid claim to a lot of areas in what we now know as the east coast of North America, but there were very few efforts to establish any real settlements, and those few efforts that they did make ended in disaster. The first real English settlement that lasted in North America was in Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. And then in the years after that, we saw a series of settlements in places like Massachusetts and other places in New England, ultimately in Maryland, the Carolinas, and so forth. English settlers also took over a previously Dutch colony in what's now Manhattan Island and New York, and established the colony of New York. The 17th century brought massive changes to England, leading both to a civil war, a restoration, and then ultimately a significant expansion of imperial power. All of this led to a much more centralized form of government that took place both at home in the British Isles and in the New World as well. And in the early 18th century, we stopped talking about England, now we started talking about Britain. There was an active union that brought together Scotland and Wales and England all into one political entity, all ruled by the King of England. And this sort of turn toward an imperial mindset centralized the governance of the country and centralized its control over its colonial possessions in the New World. Thus, during the 18th century, you see a rapid rise of the degree of settlement in these British colonies, stretching now all the way from Georgia in the south to Massachusetts and New Hampshire in the north. In the 18th century, there was a dramatic rise in the population of Britain, pushing more and more people to now settle into an increasingly British sounding or British feeling environment in the New World. So the major distinguishing characteristic of this British colonial model is that these British settlers, these English settlers, were increasingly trying to replicate the society that they had left behind. This started to a much lesser extent in the early years, but really by the 18th century, American colonies are trying to model themselves on British society, and in fact, the colonists see themselves fully as British subjects. Now, this expansion of these English colonies creates tremendous opportunities, creates tremendous wealth, but it also creates tremendous pressures on the borders. As more and more people are coming into these English colonies, which are increasingly sort of feeling like British society, they are running up against Indians who are living both within those colonies and slightly beyond their borders. And as the English start to push increasingly inwards, the tensions with Native Americans rise significantly. Tensions rise not only with Indian groups, but also with another major colonial power with possessions in the interior of the North American continent, the Empire of France.